Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to the English Globe, the place where we explore world topics and learn English together in a clear and simple way. I am Adam, and today I am here with my amazing co-host, Julia. We are very happy and excited to share a new topic with you. Before we begin, we kindly ask you to support our channel by liking this video and subscribing to the English Globe. We also invite you to write a comment below and tell us where you are listening from. Your support helps us reach more English learners, and your comments help us understand what topics you enjoy the most, so we can make better educational podcasts for you.
Hello, dear listeners. I am Julia, and I am very glad to join you today with Adam. We have a very important and interesting topic to discuss, and we will explain everything step by step in very simple English, so you can learn new words while understanding the world around you. Today we are talking about a question that many people are curious about. Why are Asian nations worried about China's expansion? This topic is discussed in many news reports, classrooms, and international meetings, and understanding it in simple language can help English learners improve vocabulary related to geography, politics, and world events.
Yes, Julia. Asia is one of the most important regions in the world. It has large populations, strong economies, rich cultures, and important trade routes. When something changes in Asia, especially something related to power, influence, and development, it can affect many countries. China is one of the largest and fastest growing countries in Asia. Because of this rapid growth, many Asian nations are watching China's actions very carefully. Some feel excited about new opportunities, while others feel worried about how these changes might affect their own future.
Exactly, Adam. And we want our listeners to understand this topic clearly without feeling confused. China has grown quickly in many areas: its economy, its technology, its infrastructure, and its political influence. When a country becomes this powerful, it naturally affects the countries around it. Some nations welcome China's development because it brings trade and investment, but others have questions about what this growth means for their independence, their security, and their long-term plans. In today's episode, we will explore these ideas slowly and carefully.
Before we go deeper, we want to remind everyone that this podcast is educational. Our goal is to help you learn English while also understanding global topics. We will not take sides or make political judgments. Instead, we will use neutral and simple language to explain ideas like regional influence, economic growth, partnerships, and international concerns. Listening carefully will help you learn useful vocabulary that can help you in conversations, exams, and daily English practice.
Yes, Adam. And dear listeners, we would love for you to participate as well. Please write in the comments where you are listening from. Are you in Asia, Europe, Africa, America, or somewhere else? Also, tell us what you think about today's topic. Do you think China's expansion is something Asian countries should worry about, or do you think it is simply a natural part of global development? Sharing your ideas will help you practice English and also help our community of learners learn from each other.
We also encourage you to focus on the new words we will use during the episode. You will hear vocabulary such as expansion, influence, regional stability, economy, cooperation, and infrastructure. These words are very helpful when talking about international topics. If you hear a new word, do not worry. Try to understand it from the context, and you can write it down so you can review it later. Learning English through interesting topics makes the language easier to remember.
Exactly. Learning English through real-world subjects is very helpful because it makes vocabulary meaningful. Instead of memorizing long lists of words, you hear them being used in natural and complete sentences. You learn how ideas connect, how explanations work, and how people communicate complex topics in simple language. Today's topic is not only interesting, but also very useful because it helps you improve your listening skills, vocabulary, and general understanding of world events.
Let's think for a moment about why this topic matters. China is one of the biggest countries in the world, and its decisions can influence many areas: trade, shipping routes, investment projects, and political relationships. At the same time, Asian countries like Japan, South Korea, India, Vietnam, Malaysia, the Philippines, and many others have their own national goals and security concerns. When a big country grows very fast, smaller or neighboring countries pay close attention because they want to protect their interests and maintain stability in the region.
Yes, Adam. And for English learners, listening to this conversation will help you understand difficult ideas in an easy and friendly way. We will explain every part slowly and clearly so you can follow without feeling lost. We will repeat key ideas in simple words to help you remember them. Our goal is to make you feel confident while listening, even if you are still at the beginner or intermediate level.
Before we move on, dear listeners, please remember to like this video if you are enjoying it and subscribe to the English Globe to support our work. Your likes and comments help our channel grow and help us continue preparing educational content for learners around the world. We love reading your messages and learning where our listeners come from. It is truly amazing to know that people from different countries are learning English with us.
Thank you, Adam. And now that we have introduced the topic, we are ready to explore it more deeply. In the next part, we will talk about China's economic rise and how it has changed the region. Then we will move on to territorial issues, military development, and the concerns of different Asian nations. Everything will be explained slowly and clearly so you can learn English while understanding global topics.
So, dear listeners, let's begin our journey together. Listen carefully, take notes if you want, and enjoy learning English with us. Thank you for joining the English Globe. Now let's explore the main question. Why are Asian nations worried about China's expansion? Dear listeners, let's now look at one of the most important parts of today's topic, and that is China's huge economic rise. Over the past 20 years, China has changed from a country with a growing economy into one of the strongest economic powers in the world. This transformation did not happen suddenly. It happened slowly, step by step, as China invested in factories, technology, transportation, education, and global trade. Today, China produces a very large amount of the world's goods, from electronics and clothing to machines and household items. Because of this massive growth, China now plays a major role in almost every part of the world economy. This change has created many new opportunities, but it has also raised questions in many Asian countries about how China's strength might shape the future of the region.
That's right, Adam. China's rise has been so fast and so large that it has become a major trading partner for almost every country in Asia. Nations like Japan, South Korea, India, Vietnam, Malaysia, the Philippines, Indonesia, and many others buy and sell goods with China every single day. China imports raw materials, energy resources, food and technology, and at the same time, it exports huge amounts of finished products to its neighbors. This deep trading relationship is important because it connects economies together. For example, factories in Southeast Asia depend on Chinese parts, and Chinese factories depend on raw materials from other Asian countries. Because of this, when China's economy grows or slows down, many neighboring countries feel the effects very quickly.
This strong economic connection gives China a special kind of influence that is different from military strength. When a country becomes a major economic partner, it naturally gains the ability to shape conversations and decisions across the region. Governments often want to maintain good economic relations because trade creates jobs, improves industries, and supports development. But sometimes, this very same economic relationship can also create worry. Some Asian countries feel that depending too heavily on one powerful economy might limit their ability to make independent decisions. They may fear that if they disagree with China's policies, it could affect trade or investment. So even though economic cooperation brings many benefits, it also creates a situation where smaller nations must carefully balance opportunity and independence.
You are absolutely right, Adam. This balance is one of the reasons why China's economic rise is such an important topic in Asia. Many nations appreciate China's investments, especially in infrastructure projects like roads, ports, railways, and energy systems. These projects help countries grow faster and improve transportation and trade. However, some leaders and experts worry that large investments might create debt or give China too much influence over important national projects. When a country relies heavily on one partner for loans, construction, or technology, it might feel pressure to support that partner's political views or decisions. This is why economic growth and political influence are so closely linked in international relations.
Exactly, Julia. And for our listeners who are learning English, this connection between economics and politics is an important idea. A strong economy allows a country to develop relationships, build partnerships, and create networks of cooperation. China uses trade agreements, investments, and business deals to build strong ties with many Asian nations. These ties can be positive, creating new jobs and improving infrastructure, but they can also lead to questions about fairness, long-term plans, and national independence. Understanding these dynamics helps us understand why some countries feel encouraged by China's rise, while others feel cautious.
Another important point is that China's rise has not only changed Asia, but has affected global markets as well. Many companies around the world depend on Chinese factories, and many industries rely on China for raw materials and advanced technology. When China changes its policies or production levels, the whole world can feel it. This makes China a central player in global trade. Asian countries are aware of this, and they understand that staying connected to China is almost necessary for their own economic growth. At the same time, they also want to make sure they can protect their national interests and maintain their own stability.
Dear listeners, it is important to remember that economic power is not only about money. It is also about influence, partnerships, and long-term strategy. When a country becomes strong economically, other nations often pay attention to its goals, decisions, and future plans. China's government has clear development strategies, and many Asian nations watch these strategies closely because they want to know how they might be affected. Some countries welcome China's leadership in areas like technology, manufacturing, and infrastructure, while others prefer to strengthen their ties with different partners to avoid relying too much on any single country.
This is why China's economic rise leads to different reactions across Asia. Some nations see it as an opportunity to grow faster, trade more, and improve their industries. Others feel that too much dependence on one powerful partner can make them vulnerable. These different opinions are normal in international relations because every country has its own history, resources, goals, and concerns. What is important for our listeners to understand is that economic power influences political decisions, diplomatic relationships, and regional stability. When China becomes stronger, everyone in Asia feels the impact in one way or another.
For English learners, this topic is a good example of how world events can help you improve your vocabulary. Words like economy, trade, influence, cooperation, investment, and dependence are commonly used in news stories and academic discussions. By listening to explanations like this, you learn how to connect these words to real situations. This makes the learning process more meaningful and helps you build confidence when talking about global topics.
That's right, Adam. And as we move to the next section, we will look more carefully at how China's economic policies connect to its political goals and why some Asian countries are becoming more cautious. We will explain everything in the same clear and simple way, so that our listeners can continue learning English while gaining useful knowledge. Thank you for staying with us as we explore this important subject.
To understand today's topic more clearly, we need to talk about territorial disputes, which are disagreements between countries about land, sea areas, or islands. In simple words, a territorial dispute happens when two or more countries say that a certain place belongs to them. These disagreements can involve mountains, rivers, borders, islands, or even large areas of the ocean. In Asia, many such disputes exist because the region is very large The geography is complex, and many countries have long histories. When a country believes that a piece of land or a group of islands is part of its territory, it may try to protect that claim through maps, laws, patrols, or diplomatic statements. This can sometimes create tension, especially when other countries believe the same area belongs to them as well. Understanding this idea helps us see why certain places in Asia are often mentioned in news reports and international conversations.
One of the most well-known areas where these disputes happen is the South China Sea, a large body of water located between China, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, and several other countries. The South China Sea is important for many reasons. First, it has busy shipping routes, meaning thousands of ships carrying goods, oil, and raw materials travel through it every year. Second, experts believe this sea may contain valuable natural resources such as oil, gas, and fish. Third, many small islands, reefs, and rocks are scattered across it, and different countries claim ownership of these places. Because of this, the South China Sea has become one of the most watched regions in Asia. When China builds structures, sends ships, or increases its patrols in this area, countries like Vietnam and the Philippines pay close attention because they have their own claims and concerns.
The geography of the South China Sea makes the situation more complicated. Many islands are very small and uninhabited, but they still matter because international law says that ownership of an island can give a country control over the surrounding waters. This includes fishing areas, natural resources, and sea routes. For example, if a country controls a certain island, it might also gain control over many kilometers of ocean around that island. This is why small pieces of land can become very important in international discussions. When China increases its activities around these islands, other nations feel that their own claims are being challenged. They may send their own ships, hold meetings with partners, or express concerns through diplomatic channels. These actions are part of a larger process where countries try to protect their interests while avoiding direct conflict.
Vietnam and the Philippines are two nations that frequently express their concerns about China's actions in the South China Sea. Vietnam has a long coastline and depends heavily on the sea for trade and fishing. The Philippines is also deeply connected to the sea because many communities rely on fishing and maritime transport. Both countries claim certain islands and reefs that China also claims. When China builds runways, docks, or facilities on these disputed features, leaders and citizens in Vietnam and the Philippines worry that these actions might change the balance of control in the region. They fear that losing access to certain areas could affect their fishermen, their economic rights, and their national security. This is why they often speak up in regional meetings and international discussions about the issue.
Another reason this region is sensitive is because the South China Sea is used by many countries for shipping. Large trade ships travel from East Asia to the Middle East, Africa, and Europe through these waters. If the flow of trade were interrupted, economies across Asia could feel the impact very quickly. For this reason, countries want the sea routes to stay open and safe for everyone. When any nation expands its presence in the area, others may worry that it could lead to restrictions, extra controls, or new risks. These concerns do not always lead to conflict, but they do increase the level of caution among governments. Decisions about ships, fishing rights, and patrols are often discussed carefully in regional meetings because leaders want to avoid misunderstandings.
The situation becomes even more complex when we consider that international law offers guidelines. But countries interpret those guidelines differently. Some nations base their claims on historical maps, while others base them on modern legal definitions. This difference in interpretation sometimes leads to stronger disagreements. China has its own view of the boundaries in the South China Sea, while neighbouring countries have their own official maps and records. When these views do not match, the dispute becomes harder to solve. Still, all sides continue to communicate through meetings, diplomatic channels, and regional organisations. because peaceful dialogue is the best way to prevent tensions from becoming serious problems.
For people learning English, this topic introduces important vocabulary such as territorial dispute, maritime boundary, shipping route, resource rights, and regional tension. These words appear often in news articles, documentaries, and international discussions. By learning how they are used, listeners gain a better understanding of how geography and politics connect. When countries disagree about land or water, the issue usually affects trade, security, and national pride. This is why disputes over small islands can be much more important than they appear. Governments must balance their national interests with the need to maintain peaceful relationships with neighbors, which requires careful planning and thoughtful diplomacy.
Geography plays a powerful role in shaping these disputes. Many parts of Asia include coastlines that stretch for thousands of kilometers, chains of islands spread across wide areas, and sea routes that connect different regions. Because so many countries are close to one another, their interests often overlap. A small island located between two nations might be seen as valuable for fishing by one country and important for security by another. This overlap creates situations where both sides feel they have a strong reason to protect their claims. The South China Sea is just one example, but it is the most well-known because the sea connects multiple countries and its economic importance affects the entire region.
These overlapping claims influence how governments plan their strategies. Some countries strengthen their coast guards, others increase diplomatic communication with neighbors, and some build partnerships with allies to ensure they have support in international discussions. Countries do not want disputes to grow into larger problems, so they often try to balance firmness with cooperation. This can be seen when nations participate in regional organizations, join joint exercises, or agree to new guidelines to avoid clashes at sea. These efforts demonstrate that even when disagreements exist, there are many peaceful ways to manage them.
Understanding territorial claims helps us understand why China's expansion worries some Asian nations. The concern is not only about land or islands, but also about how control of these areas affects trade, fishing, transport, and national independence. When a powerful country strengthens its position in a disputed area, smaller nations feel pressure to respond, and this creates a cycle of caution and preparation. Learning about these situations gives English learners a clearer picture of how geography and international relations work together in shaping the policies of different countries. As we continue exploring the topic, we will see how these territorial claims connect to wider concerns about security and regional stability.
China's military modernization has become one of the most closely watched developments in Asia because the country has invested huge resources in building new technologies, advanced ships, modern aircraft, accurate missile systems, and powerful communication tools that allow its forces to operate more effectively across long distances. And these changes make many nearby nations think deeply about how regional security might shift as this progress continues at a steady pace.
When a nation improves its military technology quickly, other countries often pay close attention because such growth can influence political decisions, border discussions, and the overall balance of power. And even if the country says its goals are defensive, the speed and scale of development can create questions among neighbors who want to understand whether these new capabilities will affect trade routes, national plans, or shared resources in the future.
Many Asian governments observe China's progress because they know that modern weapons, advanced radar systems, large naval fleets, and strong air forces play an important role in shaping how countries respond to disagreements, especially when small misunderstandings can grow into larger problems if communication is not clear, and this makes leaders think carefully about their own strategies for keeping peace and preventing unnecessary tension.
Countries like Japan, India, Vietnam, and the Philippines often speak about the importance of maintaining balance in the region because balance helps prevent any single nation from having influence that feels too strong or too sudden. And when one nation becomes much more powerful than others in a short time, smaller countries sometimes feel uncertain about whether they can rely on diplomacy alone to handle sensitive issues that involve borders, islands, or shared waters.
Military modernization also includes improving training, updating equipment, developing cyber tools, and using artificial intelligence to guide decision-making. And these changes allow a country to act more quickly and with greater accuracy in different situations. But they also make neighboring nations wonder how these advancements might be used during emergencies or negotiations, especially if old disagreements still exist or if trust is not fully developed yet.
Many experts say that China's rise is natural for a large economy with a growing global presence, but experts also emphasize that transparency is important because when a country explains its plans clearly, other nations feel more comfortable and less worried. And transparency helps reduce misunderstandings that could happen when military ships or aircraft come close to each other in areas where several countries have interests or historical claims.
Some Asian countries increase their own defense budgets not because they expect a conflict, but because they want to ensure that they are prepared to protect their trade routes, islands, and natural resources, which are very important for their economies. And since most of these countries rely on peaceful seas for shipping, fishing, and energy transport, they feel responsible for making sure those areas remain safe, stable, and free from unnecessary pressure or sudden changes.
Partnerships and alliances also grow stronger when one nation modernizes rapidly because countries often seek cooperation to maintain regional stability, improve communication, and share information about potential risks. And these partnerships are not meant to create rivalry, but to encourage peaceful dialogue, helping countries build trust and avoid situations where one misunderstanding or one miscommunication could lead to confusion that affects millions of people who depend on stable regional conditions.
Advanced military capabilities can sometimes make smaller countries worry that diplomatic discussions might become more difficult if one side feels too powerful. So they encourage open dialogue, international agreements, and peaceful problem-solving methods that focus on building confidence rather than competition. And these methods help ensure that economic cooperation, cultural exchange, and regional development continue without being interrupted by unnecessary fear or suspicion caused by military differences.
Overall, military modernization is a complex subject that involves technology, politics, history, and regional cooperation. And even though many Asian countries want peaceful and stable relationships with China, they still feel the need to understand how these rapid advancements might shape the future. Because long-term peace requires careful planning, respectful communication, and continued efforts to make sure that every country feels safe, valued, and included in discussions about regional security.
Smaller and middle-sized countries in Asia often feel pressure when a large and rapidly rising power is nearby because they must make careful choices about their economic needs, political relationships, and long-term national goals. And leaders in these countries try to balance cooperation with independence so they can protect their interests without being drawn into situations that might limit their freedom to make decisions that support their people's future.
Nations like Malaysia watch China's activities closely because they trade heavily with China and benefit from strong economic ties. But they also think carefully about regional security, territorial discussions, and the long-term effects of China's expanding influence, which means they try to build partnerships with several countries at the same time so they do not depend too heavily on one powerful partner whose actions could shape decisions in ways that may not always match their own national priorities.
Indonesia, one of the largest countries in Southeast Asia, faces a unique situation because it has a big population, strong natural resources, and many economic ambitions. Yet it still feels cautious when major powers grow quickly, and Indonesian leaders often choose a balanced approach that mixes cooperation, dialogue, and national protection so they can stay open to investment and trade while making sure their seas, islands, and long-term independence remain fully respected by all countries in the region.
Singapore, although small in size, has a very advanced economy and plays an important role in international trade. And its leaders understand that staying neutral and open is essential for keeping its position as a global hub. So they carefully manage their relationships with China by welcoming economic cooperation while also strengthening agreements with other partners, which helps them maintain stability even when large powers compete for influence across the region.
Smaller countries often feel that they must stay alert because when a big nation modernizes its military, expands its economic projects, or increases its political presence, the decisions of smaller nations can become more difficult, and they must think step by step about how each new change might affect their trade, environment, security, and local industries, especially when they depend heavily on international markets to support jobs, transportation, and daily economic activities.
Many Southeast Asian nations prefer not to take sides between major powers because choosing one side too strongly can create complications. So they focus on a strategy that experts call hedging, which means working with several large countries at the same time, increasing cooperation when necessary, and reducing risks through dialogue, agreements, and regional organizations that help them maintain their independence even when powerful neighbors make big moves in economic or security matters.
For example, Malaysia continues to trade with China while also discussing security cooperation with other countries to avoid becoming dependent on any single partner. And this approach allows Malaysian leaders to encourage growth, attract investment, and improve infrastructure while making sure that decisions about sea routes, fishing rights, and national resources are based on Malaysia's own needs, rather than pressure created by the ambitions of larger and stronger nations around them.
Indonesia takes a similar path by joining regional groups, participating in diplomatic discussions, and increasing its own maritime capabilities so it can protect its waters while still welcoming investment from many partners. And this strategy shows that medium-sized countries can maintain strong independence when they prepare carefully, communicate clearly, and choose cooperation based on practical benefits rather than fear of disappointing any powerful country with major goals in the region.
Singapore, even though it is small, remains confident because it invests heavily in technology, education, and defense to ensure that it can make independent decisions, and it supports open trade systems that allow it to work with China and the United States at the same time, proving that a small nation can stay successful when it builds strong institutions, encourages international friendships, and remains focused on stability instead of reacting emotionally to sudden changes in global power dynamics.
Overall, small and middle-sized countries in Asia try to stay independent by accepting cooperation when it benefits their people, while avoiding situations that could make them rely too heavily on one strong nation. And this balancing act helps them manage economic growth, protect security, and keep their own voice in regional discussions, showing that even smaller countries can remain strong when they focus on wise planning, respectful diplomacy, and long-term national confidence.
India pays very close attention to China's rise because both countries are extremely large, powerful, and fast-growing, and their decisions can influence the lives of more than 2 billion people across the continent. So Indian leaders study China's economic, political, and military development carefully to understand how these changes might shape the future of Asia and affect the balance of partnerships, trade routes, and long-term security across the region.
India and China share one of the longest land borders in the world, and this border runs through mountains, valleys, and remote areas where weather conditions are difficult, which makes it hard to clearly agree on every line. And these complexities have caused disagreements for many years, leading both sides to negotiate through meetings, discussions, and agreements, so they can prevent misunderstandings and keep the frontier as peaceful as possible, despite occasional points of tension.
The history of disagreements between India and China goes back many decades, and both countries remember moments when misunderstandings led to standoffs. So they continue talking through diplomatic channels to avoid problems in the future, and each side tries to present its view while listening to the other, which helps reduce risks because when two huge nations share a long border, any small dispute can become more complicated if not managed with patience, communication, and responsible leadership.
When two large nations grow rapidly at the same time, their national goals sometimes overlap, and this can create pressure in areas like trade, technology, transportation routes, and regional influence. So India often tries to strengthen its own economy and security to keep pace with China, while also building partnerships with neighboring countries. Because staying strong and independent helps India express its interests clearly and participate confidently in discussions that shape Asia's future.
India is one of the biggest democracies in the world, and it sees itself as a major regional leader that wants peaceful development, stable growth, and fair opportunities for all its neighbors. So when it watches China expand its economic projects and political influence across Asia, India analyzes how these moves might affect its own goals, and it prepares strategies that help protect national interests while still welcoming cooperation, where mutual benefits are clear and respectful.
The two countries influence many others because they have huge populations, large economies, and growing international roles. So when India and China disagree about borders, trade, or security, other Asian nations pay attention carefully, since any shift between these two giants can affect regional stability, investment patterns, and transportation networks that connect markets across the continent, especially for countries that rely on safe routes for shipping, energy, and exports.
For example, when India increases its border patrols or invests in new infrastructure in the northern regions, China observes these steps closely and evaluates whether they relate to local development or larger strategic goals. And when China builds new roads or transport links near disputed areas, India studies those actions in detail, because such projects can influence mobility, communication, and the balance of capabilities in areas where both countries want calm and clarity to avoid unnecessary tension.
India believes that communication is essential because clear dialogue helps prevent confusion in sensitive locations where soldiers from both sides operate, and regular meetings between military commanders help reduce risks, allowing them to agree on safety rules, patrol arrangements, and emergency procedures, which is important since the high mountains and difficult terrain require careful planning to keep everyone safe and avoid accidental incidents that could lead to wider misunderstandings.
Both India and China also shape Asia through their economic influence, because they trade with many countries and invest in large projects such as railways, technology companies, energy networks, and manufacturing centers, and when they compete for influence in certain areas, smaller nations sometimes feel caught in the middle. So many governments try to keep good relationships with both sides so they can benefit from cooperation without getting too involved in disagreements between these two powerful neighbors.
Many experts say that how India and China manage their relationship will affect Asia for decades, because peaceful cooperation can support growth, stability, and development across the region, while unmanaged tensions could create uncertainty for trade and investment. So both nations continue to negotiate through diplomatic channels, participate in regional forums, and explore ways to reduce risks, understanding that responsible behavior from both sides contributes greatly to Asia's long-term peace and shared progress.
India's leaders often encourage local industries, strengthen partnerships with democratic nations, and invest in technology so the country can grow confidently without depending too heavily on any single partner. And this approach helps India manage competition with China while focusing on internal development, because a strong domestic economy gives India more freedom to make independent choices and to maintain a balanced position in discussions about Asia's future direction.
Overall, the relationship between India and China is complex but extremely important, and it shows how large nations with different political systems and historical experiences can still communicate, negotiate, and search for peaceful solutions, because both understand that a stable future benefits everyone, and the way they handle their disagreements will continue to influence trade, diplomacy, security, and cooperation across the continent, shaping Asia in profound ways for many years to come.
Japan has a unique perspective when it comes to neighboring powers, because it is an island nation with advanced technology, a strong economy, and a history shaped by interactions with larger countries nearby. So Japanese leaders carefully watch China's military, economic, and diplomatic activities to understand how regional developments might affect trade routes, energy supply lines, and overall security, while also balancing relationships with the United States and other partners to ensure long-term stability.
South Korea also pays very close attention to China because it shares economic, political, and security connections with its neighbors, and its leaders understand that changes in China's policies or military presence can influence the Korean peninsula and the broader region. So Seoul works carefully to maintain economic cooperation while strengthening defense strategies and international partnerships that help protect its interests without creating unnecessary tension or conflict with China.
Japan's concerns are shaped in part by history, as past conflicts and territorial disputes have left lasting memories that influence how policymakers think about defense and foreign relations. And while Japan and China have developed strong trade connections, the presence of military modernization, new islands or facilities in strategic locations, and statements about regional influence make Japanese leaders focus on preparedness, alliances, and strategic planning to maintain security and regional balance.
South Korea's concerns are partly connected to geography and proximity because the country is located near both China and North Korea, which makes regional stability essential for economic growth and national safety. So South Korean leaders carefully monitor military exercises, trade agreements, and diplomatic negotiations, understanding that the actions of powerful neighbors can affect local industries, international investment, and the everyday safety of millions of citizens living in a densely populated area with important sea routes.
Japan often emphasizes its alliances, especially with the United States, because strategic partnerships provide security guarantees that complement domestic defense measures, and through joint exercises, intelligence sharing, and coordinated planning, Japan seeks to balance China's growing influence, ensuring that no sudden changes in regional power undermine its trade, energy supply, or territorial security, while also working through diplomatic channels to reduce the risk of misunderstandings.
South Korea takes a similar approach, using alliances with the United States and engagement with other regional partners to create stability, while carefully promoting economic ties with China, which is one of its largest trading partners, because Seoul needs to balance economic growth and regional peace, making sure that cooperation continues even if military developments or strategic moves by China raise questions about the future balance of influence in Northeast Asia.
Historical tensions also play a role in Japan's perspective, since territorial disputes over islands and disagreements about past events have shaped public opinion and government policy. So Japan invests in defensive technology, early warning systems, and maritime surveillance to ensure it can respond to potential threats, while emphasizing diplomatic discussions to prevent escalation, showing that a mix of preparedness and dialogue is key to maintaining security without unnecessarily increasing conflict in the region.
South Korea's position is affected by North Korea's proximity, but China's growing presence also matters because Beijing influences Pyongyang through diplomacy, economic assistance, and regional strategies. So South Korea carefully observes China's activities, ensuring that policies, trade decisions, and security measures protect the peninsula while maintaining open channels for dialogue, partnerships, and regional cooperation that can prevent misunderstandings from developing into larger conflicts.
Economic cooperation, alliances, and regional stability are all interconnected in Japan's approach, because trade with China supports industries, employment, and technology development. But Japan also understands that military expansion or strategic influence by a neighbor can shift the balance in ways that require careful monitoring, which is why policymakers combine trade agreements, joint exercises with partners, and participation in international organizations to maintain a stable environment where growth and security coexist.
Similarly, South Korea balances economic engagement with security planning, participating in regional forums, investing in defense modernization, and strengthening international partnerships while continuing trade with China, which demonstrates that small and middle-sized nations can manage complex relationships by using careful diplomacy, strong alliances, and strategic planning, allowing them to benefit from cooperation without compromising national independence or regional security.
Japan's leaders also recognize the importance of communication, confidence-building measures, and participation in regional security discussions, because these steps help reduce tensions, clarify intentions, and prevent accidents in contested areas or along trade routes, showing that historical memory, modern defense, and international cooperation can all be combined to create a stable environment where the country can protect its interests while encouraging peaceful regional development.
South Korea emphasizes similar strategies, focusing on transparency, dialogue, and collaboration through international institutions to ensure that its neighbors understand intentions clearly, and by maintaining a careful balance between military preparedness and economic cooperation. Seoul shows that even countries near powerful neighbors can safeguard independence and regional stability while remaining engaged in trade, investment, and cultural exchange that benefit their people and the wider region.
Overall, both Japan and South Korea demonstrate that concerns about a rising power like China are not only about military strength, but also about historical experiences, economic dependence, and strategic alliances, and these nations use a combination of planning, partnerships, and diplomacy to maintain security, protect trade, and promote regional stability, showing that proactive and balanced strategies can help smaller and middle-sized countries manage complex relationships with powerful neighbors while avoiding unnecessary conflict.
Southeast Asian countries carefully watch the rise of powerful nations like China and the United States because they want to protect their economies, security, and independence. And leaders in countries such as Thailand, Vietnam, and the Philippines understand that their choices today will influence trade, political partnerships, and regional stability for many years. So they must balance cooperation with multiple countries to maintain freedom of action and ensure that no single power dominates decisions that affect their people. Thailand, for example, engages economically with China through trade, investment, and infrastructure projects. But it also maintains strong ties with the United States, especially in areas like defense cooperation, education, and international diplomacy, which allows the country to benefit from both partners while staying independent, showing that careful management of relationships is essential to avoid overdependence on one nation and to preserve national sovereignty in a complex and competitive region.
Vietnam is another example of a Southeast Asian country that must carefully navigate its relationships with major powers, because while China is an important trade partner and neighbor, historical disagreements and territorial disputes in the South China Sea create caution. So Vietnamese leaders focus on building military capabilities, participating in regional forums, and cooperating with other international partners, while simultaneously promoting economic growth and foreign investment to strengthen independence and national security.
The Philippines faces similar challenges because its economy benefits from trade and investment from both China and the United States. But past territorial disputes in maritime areas make security and diplomacy critical priorities. So Philippine policymakers work to maintain peaceful relations with neighbors, negotiate clearly on maritime boundaries, and participate in alliances that provide security guarantees, showing that balancing economic opportunities with careful strategic planning is essential in Southeast Asia.
Geography plays a key role in these decisions because Southeast Asia contains important sea routes, islands, and access points for global shipping, energy transportation, and fishing resources. So nations in the region must think carefully about who controls these areas, how to secure maritime trade, and how to maintain freedom of navigation, and strategic partnerships with larger powers become necessary tools to manage these challenges while preventing conflicts that could harm trade or regional stability.
Trade is another central factor because many Southeast Asian countries rely on exports of goods, natural resources, and manufactured products to support their economies. And these exports often pass through waters where powerful neighbors operate. So leaders prioritize relationships that allow safe and uninterrupted commerce, encouraging investment, technology exchange, and industrial growth while maintaining the independence to make policy decisions that reflect national priorities rather than outside pressure.
Countries in the region also use a strategy called hedging, which means they work with multiple major powers simultaneously, building partnerships in areas like infrastructure, trade, and security without committing fully to one side. And this approach allows Southeast Asian nations to protect their sovereignty, reduce risks, and maintain flexibility so that they can respond to changing circumstances in ways that benefit their economies, citizens, and regional stability without creating unnecessary tension with any powerful neighbor.
Thailand, Vietnam, and the Philippines all show examples of hedging through participation in regional organizations, military cooperation agreements, and international trade forums, because these mechanisms allow nations to exchange information, promote peace, and strengthen ties with many partners at once, helping them avoid dependence on a single country while benefiting from economic growth, security guarantees, and diplomatic dialogue that supports long-term stability in Southeast Asia.
Many experts explain that the choices of Southeast Asian countries are guided by a careful calculation of risk and reward, because leaders must consider economic development, national security, historical relationships, and the growing influence of China and the United States. And this balancing act requires diplomacy, strategic investment, and careful planning so that decisions benefit the population, protect resources, and maintain independence while avoiding unnecessary conflict in a region with a complex mix of interests and ambitions.
Overall, Southeast Asia demonstrates that even smaller and middle-sized nations can act strategically when facing rising powers, because careful decision-making, engagement with multiple partners, and attention to geography, trade, and security allow these countries to maintain independence and regional influence, showing that success in a competitive environment depends on balancing economic benefits, political relationships, and strategic foresight, allowing Southeast Asia to grow and thrive without being dominated by any single power.
In conclusion, Southeast Asian nations show how geography, trade, and diplomacy combine to influence strategic choices, as leaders carefully weigh economic cooperation with China against security ties with the United States and other partners, demonstrating that independence, flexibility, and forward-thinking policies are essential tools for navigating a complex regional environment, and that the balance of relationships directly affects the stability, growth, and future opportunities of the entire region. Trade routes are a critical part of Asia's economy because many countries rely on ships to transport goods, energy, and raw materials across oceans and seas. And these routes connect factories, markets, and ports between nations. So when countries plan policies, develop infrastructure, or expand their naval presence, they consider how trade routes influence daily commerce, national income, and the ability to maintain long-term economic growth while keeping citizens' needs met across diverse regions.
Large infrastructure projects such as ports, shipping terminals, canals, and logistics hubs have a direct impact on regional decisions because they allow countries to increase trade efficiency, attract foreign investment, and improve connectivity between cities and neighboring nations. And when a major power invests in such projects, smaller countries pay close attention because these developments may influence trade dominance, shipping priorities, and economic dependence, which are important for long-term national planning.
Countries want stability along trade routes because disruptions, conflicts, or territorial disputes can slow shipments, increase costs, and affect industries like manufacturing, fishing, energy, and consumer goods, and governments recognize that protecting safe travel and commercial navigation is not only about national security, but also about ensuring that families, businesses, and industries continue to operate efficiently without unexpected obstacles or delays that could harm the economy.
Ports are particularly important because they act as gateways for imports and exports, and a nation with advanced ports and secure maritime access can boost trade volume, attract international shipping lines, and strengthen its economic influence, while countries with weaker access or smaller facilities must carefully manage relationships with larger powers to ensure their own goods can move safely, demonstrating that infrastructure and trade access are closely linked to national strategy and long-term regional stability.
Shipping routes, especially those in the South China Sea, the Strait of Malacca, and other strategic corridors, are watched closely by multiple nations because they carry energy supplies, raw materials, and consumer products for billions of people, and any interference, congestion, or dispute along these routes can have ripple effects across Asia and beyond, making governments invest in monitoring, maritime security, and regional cooperation agreements to maintain uninterrupted trade and avoid economic losses caused by instability.
Many Asian nations also recognize that peace along trade routes depends on mutual trust, rules, and agreements that reduce misunderstandings, prevent conflicts, and allow smooth operations, so countries participate in forums, naval exercises, and diplomatic discussions to coordinate security, strengthen relationships, and promote fair use of international waters, demonstrating that shared responsibility and cooperation are essential to prevent tensions from escalating into problems that could disrupt shipping, energy transport, or international trade.
Infrastructure projects by large powers can be both beneficial and sensitive because investments in ports, shipping terminals, and logistics hubs create new opportunities for commerce and development. But when these projects are near disputed territories or key maritime lanes, neighboring countries pay careful attention to ensure that such developments do not limit their independence, create unequal influence, or change the balance of control in ways that affect their own shipping, energy access, or trade agreements.
Peace and stability are therefore central to decisions about trade routes because any conflict along these corridors can affect the cost of goods, availability of energy, and efficiency of transportation networks, and countries recognize that long-term economic growth depends on reliable access to global markets, so they invest in diplomacy, regional security arrangements, and infrastructure protection to ensure that trade, travel, and energy supplies remain uninterrupted and predictable for businesses and citizens alike.
Countries also work together through regional organizations to create rules and guidelines for trade and maritime security, and these agreements promote transparency, cooperation, and risk reduction, allowing nations to use trade routes safely while minimizing the potential for conflicts, showing that maintaining open sea lanes, shared communication, and collaborative infrastructure development is essential to sustaining both economic growth and peaceful relations in Asia.
Overall, trade routes, ports, and infrastructure shape the way nations interact in Asia, because safe and efficient commerce is essential for economic prosperity, national security, and social development. And governments understand that cooperation, planning, and investment are necessary to maintain peace, protect trade, and ensure that the benefits of regional commerce are accessible to all countries, demonstrating that economic stability and regional security are deeply connected and mutually reinforcing.
In conclusion, protecting global trade routes and ensuring safe maritime corridors is a priority for Asian countries because these pathways carry goods, energy, and resources that are vital to millions of people. And by investing in infrastructure, participating in regional agreements, and maintaining dialogue between neighbors, nations can create an environment where trade and travel remain uninterrupted, showing that long-term prosperity is achieved when security and commerce work together for shared benefit. Today, we discussed many important ideas about Asia, China's growth, and how different countries respond to changes in the region. And during this episode, we used several key words like influence, which means the ability to affect decisions or actions of others; alliance, which refers to countries working together for common goals; and diplomacy, which is the practice of managing relationships between nations carefully and peacefully to avoid conflict while solving problems through discussion.
We also talked about territorial disputes, which happen when two or more countries claim the same land or sea area, and how geography, islands, and sea routes often make these disputes more complex, especially in areas like the South China Sea. And we explained military modernization, which refers to updating and improving a country's armed forces to be stronger, faster, or more effective, and how such changes can make neighboring countries feel cautious or more attentive to regional security.
Another important word is hedging, which means balancing relationships between multiple powerful countries to reduce risks and maintain independence. And we saw how countries in Southeast Asia, like Thailand, Vietnam, and the Philippines, use this strategy to cooperate with both China and the United States while avoiding dependence on a single partner, demonstrating that careful planning and strategic thinking can help smaller nations maintain freedom while benefiting from trade and security support.
We also explored terms like regional stability, which refers to the peaceful and predictable situation among neighboring countries, and trade routes, which are paths used to transport goods, energy, and resources between countries, showing how important it is for nations to maintain safety in these areas. And we explained infrastructure projects, like ports, shipping terminals, and roads, and how these projects can influence economic growth, partnerships, and regional balance, affecting both small and large countries.
In summary, the key ideas we covered include China's economic rise, territorial claims, military modernization, and the impact on small and middle-sized countries, as well as tensions between India and China, concerns in Japan and South Korea, Southeast Asia's strategic choices, and the importance of trade routes and security, all showing that understanding regional developments requires knowledge of history, geography, economics, diplomacy, and careful observation of actions by large and small nations alike.
Now, let's practice comprehension with a few simple questions. First, why do smaller countries like Malaysia and Singapore try to balance relationships with both China and the United States? Second, what is a territorial dispute and why can it create tension between nations? Third, how do trade routes and infrastructure projects affect regional decisions and economic growth? Thinking about these questions helps learners connect vocabulary to real-world examples and understand how concepts apply in context.
For English learners, it is also important to notice sentence structures, repeated phrases, and linking words we used, such as because, while, so, and, which help explain cause and effect or connect ideas smoothly. And by observing how these words appear in sentences, learners can improve their writing and speaking skills while also understanding complex topics more clearly. Learning both the meaning of words and how to use them naturally in real conversations or discussions about global events.
Remember that understanding vocabulary in context is more effective than memorizing alone, because hearing terms like alliance, regional influence, or hedging while discussing real countries, trade, and security allows learners to see practical usage, which makes it easier to remember and apply in their own English communication, whether in writing, speaking, or listening exercises, and encourages learners to explore topics with curiosity while gradually improving language skills.
We also want to highlight that patience and consistency are essential for learning English, because understanding complex topics like international relations or regional security may take time, and repeated exposure through listening to podcasts, reading articles, and practicing vocabulary in context allows learners to gradually build confidence, improve comprehension, and develop the ability to discuss important subjects using simple, clear, and accurate English without feeling overwhelmed or discouraged.
Finally, we want to leave you with a positive and motivational message. Learning English is a journey, and combining it with interesting topics like world affairs, trade, and geography can make the process enjoyable and meaningful. Because each word you learn, each sentence you understand, and each idea you explore builds your skills and confidence, allowing you to communicate clearly, think critically, and participate in conversations about global events while steadily advancing toward fluency in a way that is practical, engaging, and rewarding.
So keep listening, keep practicing, and keep exploring new ideas, because language learning becomes easier when you connect it to topics you care about, when you notice how words are used in real discussions, and when you actively think about questions, answers, and explanations, and by combining patience, curiosity, and daily practice, you can steadily improve your English while understanding the world around you in a clear, confident, and enjoyable way.
Remember, knowledge grows with attention and practice, and every episode you listen to, every new word you write down, and every idea you understand brings you closer to mastering English. So stay motivated, stay curious, and keep connecting language learning with interesting topics that expand both your vocabulary and your understanding of global events, showing that education and language skills develop together, opening doors to opportunities and understanding across the world.